I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to our next speaker, Richard Crespin. Richard is the CEO of Collaborate Up. He's also a senior associate at the Center for Strategic and International Studies. He's also an aspiring public servant, having thrown his hat in for school board elections in the past. I first met Richard when he led the Corporate Responsibility Officers Association some years ago. I just have tremendous respect for him. He works across all of the sectors, private, public, civil sectors, and he focuses on some of the most complex and almost always interesting topics that you'll ever encounter, ranging from human trafficking to protecting wildlife. And so I'm really excited to hear the story that he has today and to bring an international perspective to our stories. Richard?
Thanks, Joywind. Wildlife crime. The illegal trade in endangered species has become one of the world's largest black markets, funding criminal syndicates, fueling transnational terrorism, and many scientists now think the spread of zoonotic diseases, including SARS-CoV-2, also known as COVID-19. For the past few years, my firm, Collaborate Up, has worked to accelerate collaboration among conservation organizations, park rangers, law enforcement officials, and local communities in 7 transboundary areas of Southern Africa, places where wildlife ranges across the borders of 2 or more countries. Usually, we do this work in person, face to face. I mean, you have to picture the kinds of people we deal with. These are mostly older men who would far prefer to interact with animals than people and who fairly frequently find their lives in danger. In fact, when I first started working with one group, I asked them to do a small exercise, fill out a worksheet or help them pitch their ideas to donors. I asked their team leader if he felt up to the task. He looked me dead in the eye and said, "Richard, everyone and everything on this continent is trying to kill me. I think I can handle your little exercise." Suffice it to say, they don't like meetings. They distrust technology, and when they share information, it's need to know. So in the early part of 2020, as we were planning to bring together over 50 of these folks from across all 7 Southern African countries, including senior officials from the American embassies and the national governments, we planned things down to the minute. But in the opening weeks of March, I started to worry. I just returned from a trip to Denmark, and you could feel the anxiety on the airplane. Masks and hand sanitizer started appearing on more and more people. And our client, the U.S. Agency for International Development, had asked us for a contingency plan in case we couldn't meet in person. Then the day before I was due to depart for Botswana, I got a call. The American ambassador to Botswana had just arrived in country and was promptly quarantined. With less than 72 hours, we rotated the entire 5-day conference online. Now, many people have done that now, but back then, we didn't know if people would actually participate. Could they participate? Many of them were literally in the bush. Would the electricity hold up? What about the broadband? And even if they did, would this group of people actually hang with us? Turns out the answer was no, but also yes. The power did hold up for most people, but failed for others. Same with the internet. But surprisingly, this group, most of whom don't like meetings in normal times, stuck with us. Not just for this meeting, but for over a dozen meetings in the past year. Some drove to neighboring villages to find power or to the tops of mountains to find signal. Some got up in the middle of the night to join from different time zones. We didn't realize in those early days of the pandemic just how much people crave human interaction, how much they needed to hear from their colleagues because many of them felt they were going blind. That shutdowns meant they couldn't get out into the field. Their internal networks were dwindling or might collapse. And these meetings offered a chance for them to learn and to share, to keep their vital work going. And we've had the privilege of working with these teams in Southern Africa, as well as with other teams in Colombia, Japan, Mexico, Mongolia, Morocco, the Philippines, Thailand, Ukraine, and all across the United States and in over a dozen other countries. And from all those projects, we learned just how fundamental the meeting is to human collaboration. And we learned, because necessity is often the mother of invention, how to make online meetings not just tolerable, but actually in some cases better than in person. I'll give you just one example: crossing the language barrier. In international development, one of the major challenges lies in the fact that you often rely on the people who speak English and who know how to work with major donors like USAID. Simultaneous translation is a nightmare in person. You need to bring in the translators, their equipment, headphones for everyone. It's a mess. Wires everywhere. On Zoom, it's a press of a button. We were able to engage people in local languages and even in sign language in some cases, so much easier than in person. So I have hope. I have hope that as this pandemic ebbs, that we can continue collaborating across borders, cultures, and languages, because these tools have made us not just better meeting facilitators, but better facilitators of collaboration. And with them, we can not only continue, but accelerate the work of saving some of our world's most iconic species. Thank you.
Wow, thank you, Richard. I think during this pandemic, sometimes it's easy to stay so focused on where we are and even focus on the United States. But I think the pandemic has shown us how important it is to think globally. And that story really illustrates kind of how global, what it takes to solve complex problems. So thank you for sharing that story with us.